The sun-baked dust of Zhavar Pass clings to everything, turning the air into a gritty haze. A single bullet casing lies there on the fractured rock, engraved with cryptic markings, S77-316. It spins slowly in the wind, catching the light like a forgotten relic from battles long past. Cut to the firing line, where Amaya Whitaker, a black female soldier in her mid-30s, is roughly shoved aside by a smirking comrade. "Quota hire," he sneers. "Stay out of the way before you get someone killed." Her face remains steady, eyes like polished stone. But the sting of those words hangs in the air. Words that echo the doubts she's carried for years. She was never supposed to touch a rifle, not after the mistakes that haunted her, the ones that cost lives and buried her skills deep. She was just there to observe, to fade into the background, like so many before her, until the day America's elite snipers, hardened warriors who'd stared down death 1,000 times, started missing shot after shot. Bullets that should have found their mark veered wildly into the merciless wind. Chief Rourke, the grizzled SEAL commander with scars mapping his history, catches sight of the coin dangling from Amaya's neck. His face tightens, jaw clenching as if he's seen a ghost. For a split second, his hand twitches toward a salute. Then he looks away, burying the impulse. What secret does that coin hold, and why does it unsettle a man like him? In that moment, everything changed. Because sometimes the quiet ones, the ones dismissed and underestimated, are the storm waiting to break. In the dim glow of the forward operating base, where the Afghan dust never quite settles, Amaya Whitaker moves like a shadow among the crates and cables. She's in her mid-30s, with skin the color of rich earth and eyes that hold the weight of unspoken stories. Her days blend into one another in the supply depot, a world of inventory lists and maintenance checks that keep the machinery of war humming quietly in the background. No glory here, no medals pinned to her chest, just the steady rhythm of hands that know how to fix what's broken without drawing attention. She starts her mornings early, before the sun turns the air into a furnace. Slipping into her fatigues, she heads to the comm shack, where hardline cables snake through the sandbagged walls like lifelines in a storm. These aren't the fancy wireless systems that can be jammed by enemy tech. They're the old-school backups, thick and reliable, resistant to interference that could silence an entire operation. Amaya checks each connection methodically, her fingers tracing the insulated wires for frays or faults. It's tedious work, the kind that goes unnoticed until something fails, but she does it with a precision born from years of quiet discipline.
Around her, the younger soldiers bustle with the energy of the unscarred. They laugh too loud, boast about their latest drills, and cast sidelong glances her way. "Hey, Whitaker," one calls out, a cocky private with a fresh shave and fewer lines on his face than she has memories. "You sure you're in the right place? Supplies for the backups, not the frontliners." His buddies chuckle, one adding, "Yeah, quota hire like you should stick to counting beans. Leave the real work to us." The words land like familiar punches, but Amaya doesn't flinch. She straightens a coil of cable, her movement silent and deliberate, as if the mockery is just another gust of wind to endure. She learned long ago that responding only feeds the fire. Instead, she fades into the routine, her presence as unobtrusive as the hard lines she maintains. But beneath that calm exterior, depths swirl like currents in deep water. In the quiet moments, when the base hums with distant chatter, Amaya pulls out a worn photograph from her vest pocket. It's her father in his dress uniform, standing tall against a backdrop of American flags, his smile steady and sure. On the back, in his neat handwriting, "Hold steady, Amaya. The wind will test you, but your aim is true." He was a Marine, a marksman who taught her everything about reading the air, about patience in the face of chaos. He believed in her when no one else did, back when she was just a girl dreaming of following in his footsteps. That photo is her anchor, but it's also a reminder of loss. Later that evening, as the sun dips low and paints the tents in shades of amber, Amaya retreats to her bunk. She opens a small wooden chest at the foot of her cot, the one carved by her father's hands during his downtime in Vietnam. Inside, neatly folded, is the American flag from his funeral. crisp triangles of stars and stripes that she traces with gentle fingers. She unfolds it just enough to feel the fabric, to remember the salute at his graveside, the way the bugle notes hung in the air like a final goodbye. Then, with the care of someone preserving a sacred relic, she refolds it precisely, tucking it back into place. It's a ritual that grounds her, a silent tribute to the man who shaped her into the quiet professional she is today. But even in solitude, the wounds surface. As she closes the chest, a soft whisper escapes her lips, barely audible over the hum of generators outside. If my hands hadn't shaken that day, he'd still be alive. It's a confession to the empty air, an echo of the mistake that haunts her nights. The one mission where doubt crept in, where a misread gust sent a bullet astray and cost a comrade his life. She was younger then, full of fire, but the guilt buried that fire deep, turning her into the observer she is now.
Unbeknownst to her, Petty Officer Cruz, the team's medic with a kind face etched by too many close calls, pauses outside her tent. He's carrying a med kit for inventory, but he freezes at the sound of her voice. Cruz knows pain when he hears it, the raw edge of regret that no bandage can fix. He lingers for a moment, wondering about the woman who's always on the periphery, silent and steady. What burdens does she carry that make her whisper such things to the shadows? Amaya doesn't notice him. She stands, slinging her gear over her shoulder, ready for another night of patrols where she checks the perimeters without fanfare. The base lights flicker on as darkness falls, casting long shadows across the compound. In this ordinary world of hers, she's the unseen force keeping things together, the cables secure, the supplies flowing, the mockery ignored. But those who dismiss her miss the depth beneath, a reservoir of skill and sorrow, waiting for the moment when the wind shifts and calls her back to who she truly is. The younger soldiers continue their banter, oblivious to the strength in her silence. They see a desk jockey, a token presence, but Amaya Whitaker is more. A daughter honoring a legacy, a survivor wrestling with ghosts, a quiet professional whose true aim has yet to be tested again. And in the quiet of the night, as she walks the wire runs under the stars, that engraved coin around her neck catches the moonlight, a subtle reminder of secrets yet to unfold. The base stirred to life under the harsh glare of floodlights, the kind that turned night into a stark imitation of day. Amaya had just finished her perimeter check, the hardline cables secure against whatever shadows lurked beyond the wire. She was wiping the dust from her hands when the siren wailed, a sharp, insistent cry that cut through the murmurs of the night shift. Soldiers froze mid-stride, heads turning toward the command tent, where red lights flashed like warning beacons.
Breaking news from Zhavar Pass. A voice crackled over the loudspeakers, urgent and clipped. A comms team has gone dark. Last transmission reported enemy contact in the narrow gorges. No survivors confirmed. All units on high alert. Amaya felt a chill snake down her spine, unrelated to the cooling desert air. Zhavar Pass, a jagged scar in the mountains, infamous for its treacherous winds and hidden caves that swallowed men whole. She'd heard the stories from veterans, the ones who spoke in low tones about ambushes where the terrain itself seemed to fight back. Comms teams were the lifeline, stringing hardlines through hell to keep the voices flowing. If they were gone, it meant something had gone terribly wrong. Inside the briefing room, the air was thick with tension. Maps sprawled across tables, marked with red pins like fresh wounds. Chief Rourke stood at the front, his broad frame casting a long shadow under the harsh bulbs. His face was a mask of controlled fury, the scars from past battles standing out like etched reminders. "We've got a team missing in Zhavar," he said, his voice gravelly from years of barking orders in dust-choked valleys. "SEAL Squad leads, insertion by truck, sniper overwatch, extract the survivors, if any. This pass is a meat grinder. Winds that twist bullets, thermals that play tricks on the eye. We go in smart or we don't come out." The room murmured with nods, the elite operators leaning forward like hounds scenting the hunt. Amaya stood at the back, her role as observer pulling her into the periphery once more. She wasn't part of the action briefs, but orders had trickled down. Accompany the unit, monitor comms integrity, report back without interference. Just watch, they said. But as Rourke outlined the plan, snipers on the ridges, assault teams pushing the gully, her mind raced ahead, mapping the invisible threats, jammed signals, fractured lines, the kind of failures that turned rescues into recoveries. Captain Hale, the logistics officer, with a clipboard perpetually in hand, approached her afterward. "Whitaker, you're on this one. Brass wants eyes on the hard lines in the field. Observe only. No heroics, no stepping out of line. You're there to note what breaks, not fix it on the fly." His tone carried the unspoken. "Stick to your lane. Quota hire." Amaya met his gaze steadily, nodding without argument. Understood, sir. I'll keep the reports clean. Inside, though, a flicker stirred. The old pull of the fight. The one she'd buried after that fateful day when her hands shook and a life slipped away.
As the team geared up in the pre-dawn haze, the trucks rumbled to life, their engines a low growl against the quiet. Amaya slung her pack, the weight familiar. Binoculars, notepad, a few spare cables. No rifle, no optics that screamed combatant. She was the shadow, the unseen support. The engraved coin around her neck swayed gently as she moved, catching a glint from the headlights. Petty Officer Cruz fell into step beside her, his medkit strapped tight. He'd been quiet since overhearing her whisper the night before, but now his curiosity bubbled up. As they neared the lead truck, he leaned in close, his voice a conspiratorial whisper amid the clatter of loading gear. "That coin, I saw one like it once, back in training. Etched with S77, some Bible verse. They said it belonged to a legend, a ghost who pulled squads out of fire when all else failed. Whose was it, Whitaker? Family heirloom or something more?" Amaya paused at the truck's tailgate, her fingers brushing the coin instinctively. A faint smile touched her lips, but her eyes held the distance of secrets not yet ready to surface. "Just a reminder to hold steady, Cruz. Nothing more." But her words hung in the air like unfinished business, planting a seed of wonder in the medic's mind. What legend did it tie to? And why did it feel like fate was weaving her into this mission? The convoy rolled out as the first light crested the horizon, tires crunching over gravel toward Zhavar Pass. Amaya sat in the back, the wind whipping through the canvas flaps, carrying the metallic tang of anticipation. This was no ordinary patrol. It was a call to the unknown, a venture into the maw where comms failed and men vanished. She told herself she was just observing, but deep down the adventure beckoned, like the wind her father taught her to read, whispering of tests to come. The convoy rolled forward into the gray dawn, tires grinding against the rugged trail that snaked toward Zhavar Pass. Amaya sat wedged between crates in the back of the truck, the vibrations jarring her bones as the landscape unfolded. Barren hills rising like silent sentinels, their slopes scarred by erosion and echoes of forgotten fights. The air grew thicker with dust, carrying the faint scent of sage and gun oil from the gear around her. As the others checked their weapons with practiced ease, Amaya's mind drifted, pulled by the weight of the mission ahead. Rescue in Zhavar wasn't just a job, it was a gamble with lives, and the call to venture deeper stirred something she thought she'd silenced forever. Her fingers tightened around the coin at her neck, and suddenly the present blurred into the past. It was another valley, years ago in Iraq, under a sky heavy with heat. She was younger then, sharper edged, assigned to a recon team where her skills as a marksman had finally earned her a spot. The wind that day was fickle, whipping sand into eddies that danced like phantoms. "Target at 550 meters, the spotter had called, his voice steady. Amaya settled into position, cheek to stock, breathing in sync with the rifle's rhythm. But the gusts shifted unpredictably, now pushing left, now swirling right. She misread it, just a fraction, compensating too little for the thermal rise off the baked earth. The shot cracked, but the bullet veered, sparking off rock inches from the mark. Chaos erupted. The enemy returned fire with brutal accuracy, pinning the team. Her teammate Ramirez, a father of two with a laugh that could cut through tension, took the hit. It was a gut wound, messy and unforgiving, blood blooming dark against his vest. She dragged him to cover, her hands slick and shaking as she pressed against the flow. "Hold on," she'd whispered, but his eyes glazed over in the evac chopper, the light fading like a sunset she couldn't stop. The medic said it wasn't her fault, the wind, the intel, but Amaya knew better. Her miscalculation had opened the door to death, and guilt dug in deep, rooting like thorns in her soul. Back in the truck, the memory hit her like a wave, nausea rising with the bumps in the road. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Never again." The vow had formed that night in the hospital tent, amid the sterile smell of antiseptic and regret. "Never again will I fire a rifle," she promised the empty air, her voice breaking on the words. "I'll just observe, watch, report, stay in the shadows where I can't hurt anyone." It was her penance, a self-imposed exile from the trigger. Logistics became her refuge, cables and crates, not lives on the line. She buried her father's lessons, the ones about reading the wind's heartbeat, deep where they couldn't tempt her. Observing was safe, it kept the ghosts at bay. But even vows have cracks, and as the convoy pressed on, another memory surfaced, softer this time, like rain on parched ground. It was a stormy night back home in Georgia, years before her enlistment, when doubt had first crept in.
She'd failed a school shooting competition, hands trembling under the pressure of judgmental eyes, whispers of "she doesn't belong" from the crowd. Soaked and defeated, she stumbled into the kitchen where her mother waited, arms open. The embrace was warm, enveloping, the scent of lavender soap mingling with the rain. "Baby girl," her mother murmured, stroking her hair. "Never let others decide your worth. You've got your daddy's steady heart in you. Shake it off, stand tall. They don't see the strength brewing inside."
Amaya opened her eyes to the present, the truck jolting over a rut. Her mother's words echoed, a gentle counter to the guilt's roar. But the burdens of loss and mistakes weighed heavy, especially now, with Zhavar looming. She wasn't ready to answer the call, not when the cost could be another life on her conscience. The pass drew nearer, its shadows whispering of trials ahead, but Amaya steeled herself to refuse, observe only, no more. The convoy ground to a halt at the edge of Zhavar Pass, engines idling like wary beasts as the team disembarked. The air was already warming, carrying the sharp bite of heated stone and distant echoes from the crags. Amaya stepped down last, her boots finding purchase on the shifting gravel. The pass yawned before them, a labyrinth of fractured shale and shadowed caves where the wind whispered secrets only the vigilant could hear. She adjusted her pack, eyes scanning the ridges instinctively, but the vow echoed in her mind, observe only, no more. Petty Officer Cruz appeared at her side, his medkit slung over one shoulder, face lined with the quiet resolve of someone who'd patched up too many broken dreams. He'd sensed her turmoil since that whispered confession in the tent, and now, as the others fanned out to set positions, he fell into step with her. "You look like you're carrying the whole pass on your back, Whitaker," he said softly, his voice cutting through the clatter of gear. "Missions like this, they test us all, but sometimes God places us exactly where we need to be, not by accident, but for a reason. Maybe today's that day for you." Amaya glanced at him, surprised by the faith in his words. Cruz wasn't one for empty platitudes. He'd lost friends too, seen the randomness of war, but his encouragement landed like a steady hand on her shoulder, easing the knot of refusal just a fraction. "I don't know about divine placement," she replied, her tone measured. "I'm here to watch comms, not play hero. Last time I tried, it ended in blood." But his words stirred something, a reminder that isolation wasn't strength, that allies could bridge the gaps guilt had carved. As they moved toward a cluster of rocks for cover, Amaya's thoughts drifted to her true mentor, the one whose lessons lived in her bones. Her father, in those sun-drenched afternoons back home, rifle in hand under the Georgia oaks. "Listen close, Amaya," he'd say, his voice deep and patient as he pointed to the horizon. "The wind has a heartbeat. Feel its pulse, the way it rises and falls. And that mirage, it's the heat dancing, warping what you see. Learn it and you'll know when to fire. Steady now, breathe with it. Your shot's only as true as your patience."
She could almost feel his calloused hand guiding hers on the stock, teaching her to read the air like a map. He'd been her rock, turning a girl's curiosity into skill, even when the world doubted her. "You're more than they say," he'd insist. "Don't let the shakes define you." Those memories flooded back now, a mentor's voice from beyond, challenging her vow. Cruz noticed her distant gaze. "Thinking about someone?" he asked gently. "Yeah," she admitted. "My old man. He taught me to listen before I act. Maybe that's why I'm hesitating." Cruz nodded, a kindred understanding in his eyes. "Sounds like a wise ally to have in your corner. Hold on to that. Might be what pulls us through." Nearby, Chief Rourke oversaw the sniper placements, his commands crisp against the rising wind. As Amaya passed, his eyes flicked to the coin at her neck again. His face stiffened, a flicker of recognition crossing his features, like a man confronting a long-buried debt. His hand rose halfway, as if to salute, then dropped sharply, the gesture hidden behind a feigned adjustment to his vest. What hold did that coin have on him? Amaya didn't notice, but the moment hung, thick with unspoken history, urging the question forward. The moment with Chief Rourke's unspoken gesture lingered like a shadow as the team pushed deeper into Zhavar Pass. The trucks fell silent along the ridge, their diesel fumes hanging heavy in the still air before dissipating into the vastness. The Afghan sun climbed higher, relentless and unforgiving, turning the metal of their gear hot to the touch and baking the ground into a shimmering haze. The pass opened before them like a jagged wound in the earth, fractured shale spilling down slopes and chaotic cascades, shadowed caves gaping like empty sockets in a skull, staring back with unblinking menace. Winds came in unpredictable gusts, knife-edged and capricious, carrying the metallic tang of sun-scorched stone and whipping dust devils across the valley floor in lazy, deceptive spirals. They would die away suddenly, only to return from a new direction, as if the land itself breathed with malice. Amaya felt the shift immediately, the threshold crossed from the relative safety of the base into this hostile realm. The air hummed with tension, the kind that made seasoned operators check their straps one more time. Her father's words echoed faintly. The wind has a heartbeat. But she pushed them down, clinging to her role as observer. She lingered behind the main group, binoculars in hand, positioning herself near a spine of fractured rock that offered a vantage without exposure. No need to insert herself. Just watch, note the comms lines, stay in the shadows.
Up ahead, the sniper teams peeled off with casual efficiency. No wasted motion, no shouted commands, just the quiet placement of sectors and the particular hush before the storm. Staff Sergeant Morrison and his spotter, Rodriguez, claimed a serrated outcrop that promised clean angles into the gully below. Collins and his partner followed suit, settling into hides among the boulders. Chief Rourke scanned the high ground, his eyes sharp as ever, directing the flow with subtle nods. "Eyes on the caves," he murmured into his radio. "Watch the thermals, they'll play hell with your shots." The SEALs moved with the controlled aggression of men who'd earned their tridents in fire, but even they paused to curse the wind's fickle dance. Amaya raised her binoculars, sweeping the valley systematically. Through the glass, the terrain resolved into treacherous layers, pale, talus slopes crumbling like sand, darker limestone riddled with those dead-eyed caves, an old riverbed choked with stubborn scrub. But it was the heat distortions that commanded her attention. The mirage, that deceptive heat shimmer rising from the sun-baked stone, warping aim and vision like light bending through water. It made distant shapes dance and dissolve, turning solid rock into liquid illusions, fooling the eye and throwing off calculations. She'd seen it before, how it could turn a sure shot into a wild guess, how it masked enemy movements in waves of warped air. The valley was alive with it, a tactical nightmare where precision met chaos. The team settled in, safeties clicking off with metallic whispers, cloth rasping against stone as bodies found their natural positions. Morrison opened his rifle case with the reverence of a craftsman, while Rodriguez called out ranges in a low voice. 420 to the left cave mouth, 680 to that scrub cluster. Winds at 2-6, bumping occasionally. Below, faint figures ghosted along the far gully, not shepherds, but men carrying rifles with too much ease. They paused in the open just long enough to tease, then melted into the shadows. "We catch the mid-move, we own this," Rourke said, his tone laced with the confidence of experience. Amaya lowered her glass slightly, feeling the pull of the threshold she'd crossed, not just geographic, but internal. The pass tested everyone who entered, its shifting winds and mirages a backdrop for the coming chaos. She was here now, beyond refusal, the adventure unfolding whether she embraced it or not. But for the moment she lingered, observing as ordered, the coin at her neck a quiet talisman amid the gathering storm.
The SEALs had settled into their positions, the outcrop now a fortress of stone and steel, rifles trained on the valley below. Amaya remained behind her rock spine, binoculars steady, her observer's role a shield against the pull of action. The wind toyed with them all, gusting east to west in erratic pulses, pausing as if to mock their preparations, then returning with a sharper edge. Heat climbed from the valley floor, birthing those deceptive mirages that twisted light and hid truths. The first targets emerged at 0830, shadows detaching from the caves in loose formation, 2, then 3, swelling to a full squad. They moved with disciplined economy, rifle slung low but ready, picking paths through the broken terrain like men who'd rehearsed this ground 100 times. Range 550 to the lead cluster, Rodriguez called softly, his weather meter in hand. Winds 2-6, holding right edge. Morrison exhaled, finding his respiratory pause, the world narrowing to his scope's circle. The rifle cracked, the sound rolling across the bowl and echoing back stretched and thin. Dust puffed short of the lead fighter's boots, a clean miss. Morrison cursed under his breath, working the bolt with practiced fury. He'd qualified expert since boot camp, dope cards flawless, yet the round had walked left into empty air. He fired again at 600 meters, the bullet sparking off limestone to the right, high and wide. The fighters scattered fluidly, not in panic but with tactical grace, melting into cover while others repositioned. From another hide, Collins joined the fray, his shots doubling the rhythm, crack echo, crack echo. Bullets sang off stone, ricocheting in harmless whines, but none drew blood. At 650 meters, his round veered wildly, caught in the thermal updraft that bent trajectories like string in the wind. 4 misses, Rourke muttered, his voice edged with frustration creeping in. The SEALs recalibrated frantically, spotters tracking gusts, sweat carving paths through the dust on their faces. Thermal spiking, Rodriguez hissed. Drafts pushing opposites, it's like shooting through churning water. The valley's mirage amplified the chaos, shimmering layers that made targets flicker solid one moment, dissolve the next. Amaya watched it unfold through her glass, the patterns clear to her trained eye. The air wasn't just hot, it funneled heat in unpredictable rivers, splitting winds that carried bullets astray. But she held back, vow intact, noting the failures in her mind like silent reports. The enemies below weren't scattered opportunists. They were layered, coordinated. Forward observers, those key eyes directing fire from hidden spots, fed intel to mortar crews deeper in. And their fields of fire interlocked seamlessly, each position covering the next in overlapping arcs that turned the pass into a killbox. No gaps, no mercy, just disciplined execution that spoke of months drilling American tactics. The tide turned ugly fast. AK chatter answered the SEALs' misses, controlled bursts walking up the slope. Rock chips exploded across their hides, stinging exposed skin like angry bees. "They're bracketing us," Santos growled, his voice tight. Then came the distinctive thunk-thunk of mortar tubes echoing from the caves. "Incoming!" Rourke roared. The first round hit wide, a geyser of dirt on the far ridge. The second fell short, but the third arced in with chilling precision, detonating close enough to shower pebbles and shake the ground. That's when the first casualty struck. Staff Sergeant Morrison rolled away from his rifle, shrapnel tearing into his arm, blood spreading across the stone in a dark blooming stain. He clamped down on the wound, face pale but grim. But the sight sent a ripple through the team. Rodriguez clutched his shoulder where a fragment had opened him, red seeping through his fingers. Panic flickered in the SEAL's eyes, the unflappable elite now glancing at each other with the raw edge of doubt. "Medic!" someone barked, but Cruz was already moving, kit open, his hands steady amid the chaos. The wounded accumulated, ammunition dipping toward critical, and the air thickened with the acrid smell of cordite and fear. Group tensions boiled over in the mayhem. Santos, the hot-headed petty officer with a chip on his shoulder, shouldered past Amaya as he repositioned. "Perfect timing for the desk jockey to show up," he snarled, not bothering to lower his voice. "Brass sends us a quota higher to watch us bleed. Stay out of the way, Whitaker. You're bad luck." His mockery cut deep, echoing the base taunts, but Amaya ignored it, her focus on the valley's patterns. Collins, usually rock-solid, lost his edge, his next shot going wild as frustration cracked his composure. "Damn air's liquid," he muttered, fumbling his bolt. Grant, the youngest SEAL, froze outright, his rifle trembling in his grip, eyes wide as another mortar thumped in the distance. "We need to pull back," he whispered, voice breaking. But retreat meant exposure to those interlocking fields, a death sentence for the wounded.
Rourke felt the moment slipping, his leadership tested in this precision nightmare. He'd stormed urban hells, raided night compounds, but here the enemy's discipline aided them. Forward observers calling corrections with eerie accuracy, mortars walking closer each salvo. The ambush unfolded like a symphony, each enemy move complementing the last, suppressing one flank while repositioning another. The SEALs cursed and bled, options narrowing, helplessness mounting like the heat. Amaya slid lower against her cover, tracking the layers below. How one firing position pinned them while mortars adjusted. How the forward observers hid in mirage mails. "They're not random," she thought almost aloud. "They're a web, interlocking and lethal." The next mortar burst shook the ridge, fragments whining through the air like hornets. Morrison gritted his teeth through the pain, trying to one-hand his rifle, while Collins fired blindly, rounds lost to the thermals. Grant's freeze deepened, Santos's mockery turning to desperate snarls. Allies frayed under pressure, enemies closing the noose with disciplined calm. Tension coiled tighter, the pass a cauldron of mounting despair, waiting for something, or someone, to break the spiral. The tension on the ridge coiled tighter than a spring, the SEALs pinned under the relentless barrage, their precision unraveling in the face of the valley's deceitful breath. Amaya crouched lower against her fractured rock, binoculars pressed to her eyes, ignoring Santos's lingering sneer and the chaotic shouts around her. The air itself was the enemy now, not just the fighters below. She tracked the distortions with systematic sweeps, rivers of warped heat rising from the sun-scorched slopes, bending light in telltale patterns. Every 20 seconds the wind snapped, splitting east to west, one draft climbing hot and fast, the other falling cool and low. It created a thermal funnel, an invisible chute where bullets drifted in two directions at once, lifting high or dropping short, defying even the best calculations. "You're shooting into a thermal funnel," she said calmly, her voice cutting through the din like a weather report. The gusts bifurcate, one rises with the heat, one sinks, every round's walking sideways before it reaches the mark. The words hung there, simple and unflinching, born from years of listening to the air's secrets.
Morrison shot her a glare that could peel paint, his bandaged arm throbbing as he reloaded. "We'll adjust, observer.
Don't teach pros how to shoot. We've been dialing dope since before you pushed papers. Collins nodded curtly, frustration etching deeper lines on his face, while Santos muttered something biting under his breath about quotas and backseat drivers. Rourke glanced her way, his expression neutral, but his eyes saying enough. Stay in your lane. The dismissal stung, echoing the base mockery, the underestimation that had shadowed her career. Amaya fell silent, returning to her glass. But inside, the inner loop began, silence wrapping around her like a cloak, the weight of observation pressing heavy. Below, the enemies exploited every miss, their forward observers calling corrections with chilling precision. Mortars thumped again, rounds walking closer, bracketing the ridge with explosive punctuation. The SEALs fired back desperately, but the thermal funnel mocked them, bullets veering into harmless sparks. Grant, still shaken from his freeze, huddled lower, while Cruz moved between the wounded, his kit a blur of bandages and morphine. The valley breathed sideways, dust patterns revealing hidden positions where fighters repositioned under the Mirage's veil. Then came the mini-hook that nearly ended it all. A mortar whistled in, arcing high before slamming down dangerously close, mere feet from the main hide. The blast shook the ridge like thunder, cracking stone and sending a shockwave that knocked gear loose, pebbles raining like shrapnel. Dust billowed thick, choking the air, and for a heartbeat, the team teetered on wipeout. Morrison yelled as fresh blood seeped from his wound, Rodriguez rolled away clutching his side, and even Rourke staggered, ears ringing. Screams pierced the haze. "We're done if we don't move!" Panic rising sharp and raw. The explosion's echo rolled back changed, stretched, amplifying the helplessness. Audience gasps would fill the silence here, the near miss of visceral punch, hearts pounding at the brink. Amaya felt the engraved bullet casing in her pocket, the one marked S77/316, its cool metal grounding her amid the chaos. The verse it referenced, John 3:16, her father's favorite, flashed in her mind, a reminder of sacrifice and unwavering love. His words flooded back, clear as that Georgia afternoon. The wind has a heartbeat, Amaya. Learn it, and you'll know when to fire. But more than that, know when to step up, when silence costs more than action. He'd said it while teaching her to read mirages, his steady hand on her shoulder, believing in her when doubt threatened to swallow her whole. The guilt from a rock, the vow to never fire again, it all collided now, resolve building from the silence like a gathering storm.
She watched another shot from Collins go wide, lost to the funnel's split, the enemies advancing with intent. Mortars thumped anew, the team scrambling for scant cover. Cruz caught her eye, his earlier encouragement echoing, "Sometimes God places us where we need to be." Her mother's embrace on that rainy night resurfaced too. "Never let others decide your worth." The inner loop tightened, silence giving way to resolve, the decision crystallizing. She couldn't observe anymore. The cost was too high, lives slipping through the thermal haze. With a deep breath, sinking to the valley's rhythm, Amaya set her binoculars aside. It was time to step into the fight, her quiet professionalism awakening to meet the cave's deepest challenge. Amaya's decision crystallized in the haze of dust and desperation, her hand steady as she set the binoculars neatly on the stone beside her, like placing a pen after signing a fateful document. The ridge trembled under another near-miss mortar, the SEALs scrambling, their elite facade cracking like the fractured rock around them. She unslung her compact rucksack from her hip, drawing out a weapon that had no place on any official manifest. It was an Mk12 SPR, sleek and black, fitted with a suppressor that whispered silence, chambered for 77-grain rounds designed for precision at distance. Custom modifications gleamed faintly, years of careful use etched into the metal, a tool wielded by someone who knew its soul. She racked the slide once, the mechanical click clean and final, then checked the chamber with muscle memory honed by repetition deeper than regret. Rourke caught the movement, his eyes widening in the grit and smoke. "Whitaker, you're not cleared for that," he barked, but his voice carried more shock than command. Amaya met his gaze, calm as carved stone. "Neither are they," she replied, nodding toward the muzzle flashes winking from the valley. "But they're killing us." She flowed into prone position with fluid economy, body to ground, cheek to stock, breathing already measured. Through her scope, the valley transformed, not chasing shadows, but reading the air's secrets. The thermal funnel split paths, the mirage seams where heat wavered thin. Her first target emerged in the shimmer, a hidden forward observer, crouched mid-slope behind a boulder cluster, radio in hand, directing the mortars that gnawed at their position. He thought the mirage veiled him, a seam of warped air blurring his outline. Amaya adjusted her scope 2 clicks left, syncing her breath to the wind's pulse. The suppressed crack was barely a whisper over the firefight. Down below, the observer pitched forward, lifeless, his radio clattering silent.
The wind gusted once, holding steady for a heartbeat, then shifted eastward. Amaya's pulse thrummed even, stone shifting faintly under her as she transitioned.
The SEALs blinked in stunned silence, Santos muttering, "What the—" But Amaya was already acquiring the next, a suppressing machine gunner on the left flank, his bursts pinning their advance. She found him in the heat distortions, waiting for the mirage to thin. Another crack, and the gun fell quiet, the gunner crumpling without a sound. Dust Devil spun lazily across the valley floor, her heartbeat a steady drum matching the wind's rhythm, a loose pebble rolling under her elbow as she exhaled. Escalation came swift. An RPG team materialized in the gully, loader bending to grab another rocket, their fire bracketing the ridge with explosive threats. Amaya's scope settled on him mid-motion, finger finding the trigger reset. The shot dropped him clean, the rocket tumbling harmlessly. The wind paused, as if holding its breath, her own heartbeat echoing in her ears, stone warm against her chest as she scanned onward. The enemies adapted, a decoy radio flickering in the open, bait to draw fire while the real spotter lurked in shadow. Amaya waited, patient as her father's lessons, watching the patterns until the true target shifted, antenna glinting. She fired, the real spotter folding without warning. Gusts returned with a different edge, her pulse quickening slightly, the ridge of stone settling under her weight like an old friend. Now the single 600-meter shot that would shatter their core. The enemy commander perched high on the eastern wall, directing from concealment, his radio flashes giving him away. The distance was brutal, through shifting thermals, erratic winds gusting sideways, partial cover of rock and mirage. Amaya breathed with the valley, letting the crosshairs settle as she calculated. Hold 2 mils high for thermal lift, 1 left for the split gust, accounting for the 77-grain bullet's arc. Time stretched. She waited for the wind's heartbeat to align, mirage parting like a curtain. The suppressed round whispered out, threading the needle, through heat shimmer that would fool most, across the funnel's divide. The commander jerked, tumbling from his perch, his coordinated orders fracturing into chaos. The wind snapped sharp, her heartbeat thundering in triumph, stone grinding subtly as she worked the bolt. The mortars faltered without spotters, firing blind into empty ground. But the enemies had one more layer, a heavy sniper nest nesting in a natural chimney, assembling a weapon that could reach their extraction zone. Amaya identified it, the glint of a long barrel sealing the threat. She couldn't let it come online, not with wounded depending on escape. Without announcement, she broke cover, bounding down the slope under fire. Rounds cracked past her head, sparking off rocks at her feet. She used terrain like a map, dips and boulders for concealment, never straight lines, flowing like water through the kill zone.
The SEALs watched in awe and horror, Rourke roaring, "Cover her!" Suppressive fire erupted from the ridge, making life hell for the shooters below. Amaya reached a boulder cluster, transitioning to her sidearm, a compact pistol materializing in her grip. 2 controlled pairs dropped a flanker trying to cut her off. She angled toward the nest, loose stone betraying her steps, exposure from multiple angles. A burst forced her behind a narrow ridge, bullets winding overhead, debris showering her. Rational minds would call for backup. Amaya pulled a fragmentation grenade instead. The throw arced perfect, clearing rock to land true. The explosion thundered, silencing the nest in a plume of dust and debris. But the emotional twist struck hard. Santos, the one who'd mocked her relentlessly, took a hit during the covering fire, a round grazing his leg, blood pooling as he slumped exposed. "Santos down!" Cruz yelled, but the crossfire pinned them. Amaya saw it, her critic bleeding out, the man who'd called her quota higher, now vulnerable. Without hesitation, she risked it all, darting under heavy fire, rounds zipping like hornets. She grabbed his collar, dragging him to cover while returning fire one-handed, pistol barking defiance. "Hold on," she grunted, pressing a field dressing to his wound as bullets sparked new by. Santos looked up, pain and shock in his eyes. "Why, you?" he gasped. Amaya's reply was steady. "Because we're a team." The prejudice collapsed in that moment, his mockery crumbling under her valor. The battle's balance shifted like a tide turning. One moment, the SEALs were bleeding, options vanishing. The next, their dismissed observer dismantled the trap with clinical ruthlessness. Amaya worked through targets mathematically, each kill deliberate, the thermal funnel no longer a foe but a map she read fluently. Where snipers struggled, she compensated with subtle instincts, shooting through shimmers that hid ghosts. The machine gun flank went silent, the RPG team scattered leaderless. Collins, confidence returning, landed his first hit following her lead. "Finally," he muttered, renewed.
Enemies adapted with smoke, white phosphorus bursting to obscure the field, masking repositions. But Amaya scanned patterns, how clouds thinned in winds, sounds carrying altered through haze. A muzzle flash flickered fractional, she placed a round true, the figure falling revealed. Impossible, Morrison whispered, awe breaking through pain. Mortars quieted fully, forward observers erased. The commander's loss unraveled their discipline, fear making them predictable, individual dashes exposing flaws.
The SEALs sensed it, maneuvering with suppressive fire, angles opening like doors. Rourke's voice held wonder. They're breaking. Decades of tactics rewritten by one quiet woman. But Amaya pressed on, the ordeal's heart pulsing, wind gusting fierce, her heartbeat a warrior's drum, stone shifting under boots as victory edged closer. The ordeal's fury ebbed like a receding storm, the valley's chaos fracturing under Amaya's relentless precision. What had been a desperate defense transformed in moments, the enemy's interlocking web unraveling, gaps opening where none had existed. The SEALs, stunned by the display, felt the shift, viscerally, from pinned prey to predators reclaiming the ground. Rourke's voice crackled over the comms, no longer edged with frustration, but laced with newfound respect. "Follow Whitaker's calls," he ordered, his tone brooking no argument. "She's reading this valley like a book. Adjust to her leads, thermals, winds, all of it." The team adapted swiftly, their elite training kicking in now that the fog of failure lifted. Santos, bandaged and propped against a rock after Amaya's daring save, watched with wide eyes as she continued her methodical work. No more mockery from him. The wound in his leg paled against the one to his pride. Her valor, a mirror reflecting his misjudgments. Collins, who'd struggled with the Mirage's tricks, listened intently as Amaya murmured corrections from her position. "Target at 3 o'clock, cave mouth, hold 1 mil high for the uplift, breathe with the gust." He settled his rifle, cheek to stock, syncing his shot to her rhythm. The crack echoed true this time, the bullet threading the thermal funnel to drop a fighter who'd exposed himself in relocation. "Hit confirmed," Collins breathed, a grin breaking through the dust on his face. "Finally, thanks to you, Whitaker." The reward bloomed in that moment, justice restoring balance like dawn chasing shadows. The SEALs, once dismissive of the quiet observer, now orbited her insights, their firepower amplified by her unseen expertise. Morrison, arm-wrapped but functional, managed to nod her way as he worked his bolt left-handed, his next round finding mark under her guidance. Grant shook off his freeze, suppressive bursts covering flanks with renewed vigor. Even the wind seemed to conspire in their favor now, its heartbeat an ally rather than foe, as Amaya's lessons from her father echoed in every adjustment. Cruz, patching up the last of the wounded, couldn't contain his awe. As another enemy position fell silent, Amaya's suppressed shot erasing a lingering threat, he pumped his fist and shouted over the din, "No one calls her a desk officer now! That's our guardian angel down there!" The words carried across the ridge, a mini-hook that landed like a salve on old wounds, eliciting tight smiles and nods from the team. Santos averted his eyes, the sting of his earlier taunts turning to quiet gratitude. Rourke overheard, his scarred face softening for the first time, the coin's mystery still tugging at him, but overshadowed by the present triumph.
The battle tide had turned fully, the enemy's discipline crumbling into frantic retreats. Without their commander and spotters, their movements grew erratic. Individual fighters breaking cover in fear, predictable in their panic. The SEALs exploited it ruthlessly, pushing the rescue element forward under covering fire that now hit with surgical accuracy. Mortars sputtered to ineffectual bursts, landing wide in the empty scrub. The pass, once a death trap, opened like a path cleared of thorns, American forces owning the lanes they'd nearly lost. Amaya remained in her prone vigil, scope sweeping for remnants, but the inner rewards settled deeper than any kill count. The guilt from Iraq, the vow she'd shattered, it all reframed in this crucible. Her mother's words about worth, her father's teachings on steadiness, Cruz's faith in placement, they converged here, affirming her place not as outsider, but essential. The team followed her lead without question, calls flowing like a symphony. Wind shift, compensate left, mirage thinning, take the shot. Collins landed another hit, then a third, his confidence rebuilt on the foundation she'd laid. "You're rewriting the book on this," he called to her, voice carrying genuine admiration. Justice restored rippled through the group. Prejudice is collapsing like spent brass. Santos, helped to his feet by Cruz, met Amaya's gaze as she rose briefly to reposition. "Whitaker, I was wrong," he admitted through gritted teeth, the words a bridge over the chasm he'd dug. She nodded simply.
No gloating, just the quiet professionalism that had saved them all. The SEALs gathered their wounded, ammunition conserved now that the fight tilted their way. The valley's echoes fading from threat to memory. In the reward's glow, the team breathed easier, the pass's malice subdued. Amaya slung her rifle, the coin at her neck catching the climbing sun, a talisman of legacies honored. They'd extract the comm survivors soon, but the true prize was this: respect earned in fire, unity forged from doubt, a quiet professional stepping into light.
With the tide firmly turned, the SEALs pressed their advantage. But victory in Zhavar Pass demanded more than dominance. It required escape. The comms team survivors, battered but alive, were located in a shallow gully, their hardlines severed like lifelines cut short. Rourke gave the order. Extract now. Push the wounded through the choke point. Whitaker, cover the rear. We've got a narrow window before they regroup. The team moved as one, the unity forged in fire, now a seamless machine. Amaya nodded, rifle slung tight, her role evolving from observer to anchor. The pass's eastern wall funneled them into a deadly choke, a tight defile of boulders and sheer drops, exposed to any lingering threats from above and below. It was the road back, treacherous and unforgiving, where retreat could turn triumph to tragedy. They dragged the wounded with grim determination, makeshift litters fashioned from ponchos and straps. Morrison leaned on Rodriguez, his arm a bloody sling, while Grant helped the comm survivors stagger forward, their faces gaunt from hours in hiding. Santos, his leg wound throbbing despite Cruz's quick work, was hauled between two SEALs, sweat beading on his brow as pain lanced with every jolt. The group snaked through the choke point, boots scraping over loose shale that threatened to slide, the wind howling through the narrow gap like a lament. Enemy remnants fired sporadically from distant perches, rounds pinging off rocks, forcing heads down and hearts racing. "Keep moving, don't bunch up," Rourke barked, his voice a steady beacon amid the echoes. Amaya brought up the rear, eyes scanning the terrain with the vigilance her father had instilled. The mirage still danced on the slopes, but the thermals had cooled slightly with the sun's angle, offering fleeting clarity. She spotted movement, faint shifts in the scrub where fighters might lurk, desperate to salvage their ambush. A burst of AK fire stitched the ground ahead, forcing the team to hug cover. Cruz, ever the ally, glanced back at her. "We're almost through. Just hold the line." Amaya returned fire suppressed, a single round silencing a distant muzzle flash. The road back tested them all, the wounded's groans a reminder of the cost. But her actions had bought them this chance.
Tension mounted as they neared the choke's narrowest pinch, a bottleneck where the walls closed in like jaws. Shale crunched underfoot, the air thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood. Santos gasped as his litter jostled, his face pale but his eyes locked on Amaya. "Didn't think I'd owe my life to you," he muttered between breaths, the words a bridge toward amends. She offered a tight smile, focus unbroken. "Save your strength, we're not out yet." Then came the mini-hook that nearly undid them. From a spider hole barely 15 feet away, a concealed burrow dug into the earth like a trapdoor spider's lair, a fighter erupted without warning. He rose, filthy and feral, AK-47 tracking toward the group's center mass, eyes wild with fanatic zeal. At that range, with the team strung out and vulnerable, he could have cut them down like wheat. Amaya's instincts fired before thought, her pistol whipping up in a blur, double taps barking sharp and final. The first round hit center mass, the second higher, dropping him backward into his hole, weapon clattering useless against the stone. The echo reverberated through the choke, the team freezing for a split second in shock. "Clear," Amaya called, sweeping for more threats, her heartbeat thundering, but steady. The SEALs exhaled collectively, the near miss a punch to the gut. Rourke nodded her way, respect etched deeper. "Nice work. Keep us covered." They pushed on, dragging the wounded faster now, the choke point's jaws widening as they emerged onto safer ground. Santos, pulled along in the litter, reached out weakly as Amaya caught up. His hand gripped her arm, voice a ragged whisper amid the wind's howl. "You kept us alive. All of us. I was blind. Quota higher? You're the real deal." The words carried the weight of forgiveness sought and justice delivered, his earlier mockery dissolving in the crucible of survival. Amaya squeezed his hand briefly, her expression softening. "We all make mistakes. What matters is we get home." It was a strong emotional punch, audience hearts swelling with the resonance of redemption, the quiet professional granting absolution without fanfare. The road back continued, the team clearing the defile into open ridge where extraction waited. Enemy fire dwindled to nothing, their will broken by the losses Amaya had inflicted. Cruz tended to Santos en route, murmuring encouragement. while Collins and Morrison shared a look of quiet awe. "She saved our asses. Multiple times," Collins said, voice low. Grant, shaken but steadied, nodded. "Never judge a book again." The group bonded tighter, prejudices buried in the pass's dust, whiffing forgiveness through the justice like threads in a flag.
As they crested the final rise, the helicopter's distant thump promised deliverance. Amaya walked among them now, no longer the outsider but the heart of the team. The coin at her neck swayed, a talisman of legacies fulfilled. The road back, not just physical but emotional, a path from doubt to unity, where forgiveness healed what fire had scarred. The medevac helicopter's rotors thumped like a heartbeat as it touched down on the ridge, dust swirling in a vortex that blurred the lines between triumph and exhaustion. The fight was over, the pass silenced. Enemies scattered or fallen in the wake of Amaya's unyielding precision. The team loaded the wounded with efficient care. Santos eased onto a stretcher, his legs stabilized. Morrison and Rodriguez leaning on each other like brothers forged in fire. The calm survivors, pale but grateful, climbed aboard, their severed hardlines a testament to the chaos they'd endured. Amaya stood apart for a moment, wiping grit from her rifle, the weight of the ordeal settling into her bones like an old ache finally easing. Chief Rourke approached her then, his broad frame cutting through the settling dust, face streaked with sweat and resolve. The SEALs gathered instinctively, a loose semicircle of hardened men, now softened by what they'd witnessed. He stopped before her, eyes locking on hers with the gravity of a man confronting his past. Without a word, he snapped to attention, hand rising in a crisp salute. Not the casual nod of peers, but the formal honor reserved for legends. The team followed suit, one by one, salutes rippling through the group like a wave of acknowledgement. Santos, from his stretcher, managed a weak one. Collins and Grant stood tall, their earlier doubts buried. "Captain Whitaker," Rourke said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "You didn't just save us today. You reminded us what true professionalism looks like. Respect." Amaya returned the salute, her posture straight, but inside a dam broke. The gesture washed over her, the affirmation erasing years of whispers, of being the quota-hire, the desk jockey. She forgave herself in that instant, the guilt from Iraq's misread wind dissolving like mist in the sun. No longer defined by that shaken hand, that lost life, she embraced her worth fully. The quiet professional her father had raised, the resilient woman her mother had nurtured. "Just doing what needed done, Chief," she replied modestly, but her eyes shone with the light of self-acceptance, a resurrection from the shadows of doubt.
Rourke lowered his hand, hesitating as his gaze fell to the coin dangling from her neck, the engraved S77/316 catching the light. His face tightened, a flicker of long-buried memory surfacing. "That coin, it belonged to a man who saved my life years ago, in a valley not unlike this one. Sergeant Harlan Whitaker. Pulled me from a collapsed bunker under fire, took a round for it, died before I could thank him properly. How do you have it?" The twist hung in the air, a revelation that tied threads of fate across decades. Amaya's breath caught. Her father, the legend Cruz had hinted at, the ghost whose lessons had guided her shots today. "He was my dad," she said softly, fingers brushing the metal. "Gave it to me before his last deployment. Said it was for holding steady." Rourke's eyes misted, the salute's formality giving way to a deeper bond. "Then it's come full circle. He saved me once. Today, his daughter saved us all." The team absorbed the moment, the resurrection not just Amaya's, but the group's, rising from the ashes of prejudice and peril. Cruz, helping secure the last stretcher, leaned close to her as the rotors spooled up. His whisper carried over the noise, a mini-hook that sealed the resonance. Maybe that coin finally found its rightful owner. God's got a way of making justice come late, but it comes. The words echoed her inner peace, faith weaving through the legacy, affirming that worth wasn't given but earned, forgiveness not just for others, but self. As the helicopter lifted, the pass shrinking below into just another stretch of rugged earth, Amaya settled near the door, watching the sun climb higher. The team sat in contemplative silence, processing the resurrection, from near defeat to victory, from division to unity. Rourke stared out, his debt repaid through her. Santos closed his eyes, amends made. Collins and the others exchanged nods of quiet respect. Justice had come late, through a coin's journey, a daughter's valor. But it came, deep and moral, a reminder that even in war's crucible, worth shines through.
The helicopter climbed away from Zhavar Pass, the valley shrinking to a distant scar on the earth, its shadows no longer a threat, but a memory etched in dust and resolve. Amaya sat by the door, wind whipping through the cabin, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun painted the mountains in golden hues. The team rode in silence, each man lost in his thoughts, Rourke contemplating the coin's full circle, Santos wrestling with gratitude, Cruz offering quiet prayers for the wounded. The elixir they carried back wasn't just survival. It was the profound truth unearthed in the fire, that worth blooms from within, that quiet strength reshapes the world. Days later, back at the base, under a clearer sky, Amaya found herself at the memorial wall, a solemn expanse of stone inscribed with names of the fallen, heroes who gave everything for the flag. Morning light filtered through the trees, soft and forgiving, illuminating the eagle tattoo on her forearm, a symbol inked years ago, wings spread in eternal flight, a tribute to her father's unyielding spirit. She held the engraved bullet casing in her palm, S77/316, glinting like a promise kept. It was the one ejected from her rifle during the ordeal, a relic of the shots that turned the tide. With gentle precision, she placed it at the wall's base, among faded photos and folded notes left by others. The act was a release, a final honoring, not just of the dead, but of the living wounds she'd healed in herself. Forgiveness settled fully now, her embrace of worth complete. She was no longer the shaken hand or the underestimated shadow, but the daughter who had risen to fulfill a legacy. As she stepped back, the humanistic message crystallized in her mind, a lesson distilled from the pass's crucible. In churches, grocery stores, neighborhoods, there are always quiet professionals. They don't make noise, don't seek the spotlight or demand acclaim. They're the veterans volunteering at the VA, the grandmothers teaching resilience to their kin, the everyday souls who step up when crises whisper. They carry skills honed in silence, ready to save everyone when the time comes. Like her father, saving Rourke without fanfare. Like her, dismantling an ambush with steady aim. It's the essence of true heroism, not in the roar of battle, but in the quiet acts that bind communities, that remind us strength often hides in plain sight.
The base hummed with routine around her, soldiers passing with nods of respect now, whispers of her story spreading like ripples in a pond. Amaya thought of her mother, that rainy night embrace urging her to claim her value, of Cruz's faith in divine placement, of Santos's amends in the choke point. The elixir returned with her was this wisdom. Justice may come late, winding through years and valleys, but it arrives, transforming doubt into dignity, division into kinship. She touched the eagle tattoo, feeling its lines under her skin, a permanent mark of flight from chains of self-doubt. And in that spirit, a gentle invitation extended to those who might hear her story. Have you ever been underestimated, dismissed as too quiet, too ordinary, only to prove your worth when it mattered most? Share that time in the comments below, the moment you stepped up, silent strength shining through. We read every one because your stories remind us all that heroes walk among us, unannounced. The closing quote lingered as she walked away, the wall's shadows lengthening in the morning light. The wolf doesn't announce itself to the sheep. It's a reminder etched in legacy, and the quiet professionals who guard the flock without fanfare, their valor a whisper until the storm demands a roar.